Our beloved 8% Hard AF Seltzer is now live in over 2,500 locations across the United States. We're now available in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. Go to hardafseltzer.com today, click on the store locator, enter your city or zip, and find the nearest location closest to you.
Welcome to Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com.
Yeah, welcome to Drinkin' Bros, kids. From time to time on this old program of ours, we got some fancy politicians on, and today is no difference. We got the first man to ever be a Green Beret and make it into United States Congress. He's got a new book that drops next week called Hard Truths. Mike Waltz, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, great to be with you guys. And I still haven't figured out how I'm the first Green Beret in Congress. I keep waiting on some old guy at like a town hall to stand up. You lying son of a bitch. I was in the 60s or whatever, but apparently I'm it. Well, I keep telling Crenshaw and Morgan Luttrell and those guys that there's been 5 SEALs. Just takes 5 of them to equal one of us, and call it a day, right?
I think your math is actually generous to the SEALs.
Very generous there, yeah. And I think is Crenshaw. He's a raspberry beret, kind of like Prince, right?
I don't know. I think it might be fuchsia or something like that.
Okay.
But anyways, we're not going to get into that today. It's the first class of Green Berets. A lot of them were like Eastern European dissidents and stuff. So just guys that spoke the language. So they probably wouldn't have been eligible. I guess the Vietnam era guys would have been the ones, right?
Yeah, it's the Lodge Act, right? Mm-hmm. Where we were recruiting them in. They spoke the language and then train them up and then send them back behind enemy lines with suitcase-sized tactical nukes. Run fast.
Yeah. The good old days,
The fun stuff, not like today. Yeah. Today, you got to check your pager, your cell phone, your walkie-talkie. Shit's blowing up everywhere. Used to be so simple.
Go ahead and float that con-op PowerPoint slide, up the chain. See how far that goes.
Yeah, probably not far in our military, to be honest.
Nope.
Yeah, it's a different time indeed. One, we appreciate you being here. Obviously, it's we're getting close to the election. Want to chat about your book, but in the meantime, obviously, in 3 weeks, I consider it the most important election in my lifetime. What are you hearing on the ground and from inside Congress as far as how Trump's doing on internal polls?
It's so, as you guys probably know, the magic sauce is, and the kind of the sausage making the polling is how they predict turnout. And that's how you get, they adjust these dials, and there's the persuasion, and are you persuading independents? There's not that many undecided left, but really it's about driving turnout on either side. And you're just seeing a lack of enthusiasm, at least from what the campaign's seeing on Kamala's side. She's kind of running away from Biden's record. Not quite, depends on when it's inconvenient, but what's she running towards? And I think we are working hard to define how she really feels, which is all the stuff she said in 2019 in terms of taking away your health care, decriminalizing illegal aliens, and on down the list, even going after plastic straws, which, flip, flop. So it's a clear contrast on what life was like for your wallet, for your family security, for world security. Heck, just 4 years ago, we were signing peace deals on the White House lawn. Now you got ballistic missiles flying between Iran and Israel, and our Navy ships getting used as target practice by the Houthis in the Red Sea. So the contrast is what we'll keep hammering. It's very clear what it was back then and what worked, and then who the heck knows? Depends on which audience she's talking to, and so that's softening her support, and the enthusiasm is through the roof on the Republican side.
Yeah, it didn't take long, did it?
No.
It didn't take long to butt fuck the border.
4 years.
Forget about the border. This always happens whenever a lefty gets in office. Usually what happens is they'll have 2 years of unmitigated border access, and then they'll run a whole campaign where they're clamping down on the border. That's what Obama did, right? And he ended up deporting more people than anybody ever. So big problem there, obviously, and there's plenty of conspiracy theories around that, but it doesn't really matter why. What matters is stopping that bleeding. Yeah, you know what I mean? Now, the really crazy thing to me is how poorly managed our foreign policy has been in the last couple of years. And look, this is something that you can go back to Obama on this and his dealings with Iran. Trump's campaign speeches, they were weak and poor, basically, right? Weak and broke, or whatever he says when he was in office, which is absolutely true. Obama gave him some money, $100 billion. These guys gave him some money and just let them kind of do whatever they want. There's consequences to that shit, right? Like, I don't think anybody... No serious person that I know is arguing that we should be going to war with Iran. That's just nonsense. But there are some things that Trump did that were very effective. One, building a coalition against that bullshit, right? Like the Abraham Accords might be, should he get elected now and then finish what he started with the Abraham Accords, that might be the most monumental foreign policy move in the history of our country, to be honest. Right? I mean,
worthy
that's
of a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, that's something that carries us well into the future. Yeah, that's something that carries us well into the future. It interrupts all the BRIC stuff. It probably guarantees that the U.S. dollar stays the world's reserve currency, and it stabilizes a region that we need to be stable. I've said this many times before with this Houthi bullshit. Yeah, it's a couple of thousand knuckleheads in some bullshit country nobody cares about. But Lloyd's of London has gone within a 3.5-year period from ensuring $150 million worth of cargo through the Suez Canal every single day to down to $50 million. They've cut global trade by a third in that region. People that don't have shoes. Yeah. It cannot happen, right? Yeah. And it's all happened under this administration.
And Mike, for you, you were a former White House and Pentagon security advisor. How hard or difficult will it be if Trump gets back in to repair these relationships and go back to the peace deals that he made before? Because I thought those were impossible. Now every side is at war with one another. How difficult is that going to be for him when he does get back in office?
Well, it's not going to be easy, but it's completely doable. Remember when he came in the first time, ISIS was running a caliphate the size of Texas, an economy the size of Austria. So remember, Obama yanked us out of Iraq. Fine. I mean, I don't think we should have been there forever anyway, but he yanked us out of Iraq with no plan. Al-Qaeda morphs into ISIS. They explode on the scene a couple of years later in 2014. And then, President Trump comes in and has to deal with it. But at least he had some tools. We have bases in Turkey and Jordan and Israel and in the Gulf. We had local allies still on the ground and the Kurds. We had the government to deal with in Baghdad, and what was just a year later, ISIS largely contained, Baghdadi dead, Iran on its back foot, its currency tanking, its oil exports dropped from 4 million barrels a day to under 400,000, and then Soleimani, their field general, taken out. All precise applications of power without, nation building. But let's contrast that with what he's going to have to deal with Afghanistan after that debacle of just a complete shit show of a withdrawal that we're still dealing with today with the terror cell that was just busted up in Oklahoma City. If we have to send guys back in to deal with that, you got no bases in the region. You gave up Bagram. You got no government to deal with. You got $80 billion of our equipment that our own soldiers are going to have to fight through, and our allies that were on the ground are getting hunted down right now as we speak. I'm still maintaining contact with the former Ahmad Shah Massoud, his son, who was in the Panjshir Valley. As you guys know, that was the holdout with both the Soviets and the Taliban back in the 90s. But they don't have a plan B. President Trump is going to have to go in and clean it up. It's completely doable. But man, what a mess. Again, the same team around Obama was the same team that was around Biden. Yeah. Biden-Harris. Yeah. And these were the kids that like showed up to deal with the schoolyard bully. They're like, can I just give them a little more lunch money? can maybe I throw in my ham sandwich and my fruit roll up and he'll leave me alone? Well, no, somebody's got to punch the bully in the mouth and restore peace.
Yeah, Winston Churchill said appeasement is feeding the crocodile hoping he eats you last. That's a moronic way to go through life.
It is.
Right? Especially with
that's what this security team is doing. That's what Blinken, Austin, Sullivan, all the people around Biden and Harris, they wake up in the morning thinking of another concession they can make to the Iranians and to the Russians.
Yeah. And how frustrating is that for you, having to work with these people every day up in D.C., knowing that they're doing this over and over and over again and not helping our own people here?
Well, I mean, I sit on the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the Oversight Committee, and now an additional duty, the Trump Assassination Task Force. So they can't hide from me. State, USAID, the intelligence community, DOD, they can't do this and point to each other. So I see it all. It's frustrating as hell because this isn't a result of, some kind of act of God or a tsunami or what have you. This is just bad policy after bad policy because it was working under President Trump, but because it was Trump's policy, they had to go, back in the opposite direction. And I'm fully convinced this wouldn't have happened on his watch.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And we'll start with Ukraine because Ukraine was first. Russia invades Ukraine. Right after.
That wasn't first. Though.
Afghanistan was first.
Oh, you're right. Yes,
Afghanistan was first. Yeah, they also had amassed troops on the border. And somebody just flat out asked Biden, would it be a red line if they invaded Ukraine? He said, nah. What?
Yeah.
The fuck are you talking about?
Incursion. Yeah, minor incursion. And I'm thinking okay, so if somebody takes Delaware, is that a minor incursion? Like, what the hell is a?
Yeah, I mean, look, frankly, I don't give two fucks about Ukraine. I don't think $1 US should be spent in that place. Not one. No. Not a cent, as a matter of fact. However, just to put the facts out, Bush was incompetent and allowed Georgia to be taken, or at least fucked with. And then under Obama, Crimea. And then under Trump, it was crickets.
Yep.
You didn't hear shit, right? And then as soon as he's out of office, it's like, you know what? They see this Afghanistan withdrawal. They see the fact. Forget about how disastrous the withdrawal itself was. They saw the fact that we put the national security state, the State Department, in charge of that operation and not the DOD, whose job it is. And they were like, oh, these people don't know what the fuck they're doing. Great. So this is the guy to steal on now. Mm-hmm. America's the guy to steal on. That's just how it is now.
So if Trump gets in there, I think this is over pretty quickly. Ukraine's probably got to concede some land in that deal, and I think it's done because I don't think he's going to give them any more money.
Well, look, I mean, initially, I do believe Putin when he says he wants to reconstitute the old Soviet Union. That means Ukraine, the Baltics, portions of Poland. Now you're bumping into NATO countries. We're treaty obligated. I don't want our troops fighting Russian troops. So initially I did vote, give the Ukrainians the beans and the bullets. They'll do the fighting and die and stop Putin. But now he's been stopped. And what I keep asking is, okay, what now? What does success look like? What's in our national interest? How long? How much are we going to pour into this? And is it really in our critical national interest to expel every Russian off of every inch of Ukraine, including Crimea? Is that even realistic? And the thing that pisses me off the most is Russia is still exporting its oil. It's selling its gas all over the world through Hong Kong and India now, rather than through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. But guess who's buying it? The Europeans are still buying it.
Germany, especially.
And Biden cancels the Keystone XL pipeline, our gas and oil. He puts an LNG ban on our oil and gas. What President Trump knows, bottom line, you flood the global markets with our cleaner, by the way, oil and gas. You drive down those prices. Russia is a gas station with nukes. And below a certain threshold, about $50, $55 a barrel, it can't afford the war anymore. Heck, its entire economy is on its back foot. You can win this economically. And oh, by the way, you dry up Iran's war machine, too, as it funnels all of its money to Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, because it's flush with cash. Guess who's buying its oil? China. President Trump was absolutely right. We passed sanctions in the House They've done nothing in the Senate. Schumer's sitting on it that would sanction Chinese buyers of Iranian oil and gas. It's the refiners, the buyers, the shippers. You dry the whole thing up economically. It's all about the cash.
Yeah, we know exactly how to do this, as a matter of fact, because we've done it before, right?
We've done it.
This strategy of interdicting in Ukraine, even financially, won't work because it didn't work in the past. The containment phase of the Cold War was an unmitigated failure. It constituted as well the rise of the military-industrial complex and the security state in the United States. Rollback under Reagan is what really worked. We're rich, they're fucking poor, right? The end. That's how it works. Unleash the American consumer and producer, big business, low taxes, people spending money, and Russia will fucking go away. It will break their back if we just outspend them. So why are we getting into a fight? I mean, this is like you're a billionaire inside of a secure facility, and there's a guy outside talking shit, and you open the door and let him in to fight him. That's stupid. Shoot him through the window. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to do this. But really, it's all about who gets what money. That's what it's always going to be about. It's a national security state siphoning funds off of the American public. That's all it ever is. There's that and garden variety incompetence, I suppose. But it's, again, a big problem that people that don't understand our history are in charge of our future. We got to get these people the fuck out of the way.
Yeah, and
by the way,
hopefully that happens soon.
The European economy is the same size as the United States, EU and the United States, and you've got 30% of NATO countries living up to its bare minimum commitment. That's finally increased. World War II on their doorstep, almost World War III. And now they've increased it to 50%. That's like telling the F student, congratulations for getting a D. It should be 100%, fund their own defense. And then maybe we celebrate those that are like 3 or 4% of GDP, not the bare minimum of 2. But the bottom line is, European politicians are getting a great deal. They can flood their population with all these socialist goodies, while ours, Biden keeps telling, and Harris too, keeps telling our taxpayers, dig deeper to fund European defense. Enough is enough. We need to shift to Asia, and we need to deal with China, whose Navy is now larger than ours, whose Air Force is almost larger than ours, the Space Force is larger than ours, and they're tripling their nuclear arsenal. And by the way, they're doing it on our money. And so we've got to shift to deal with what I think is the greatest threat we've ever faced.
The problem, though, Mike, is everything we're talking about, it seems like so much for one man to do in 4 years. Look, if he gets in, J.D. Vance has been great. Lights out on that debate. He's been great on the campaign trail. He might be the guy for 28. But Trump would have to clean up Ukraine. He'd have to clean up the Israel situation, the China situation, the immigration issue with the border, inflation. I mean, my God, that's a checklist that, that's an 8-year checklist, not a 4-year checklist. It seems like. Is it too much for one man to ask for?
Well, I'm a Christian. I believe a lot of these things happen for a reason. I think the country had to see a couple of years of what left-wing progressive governance looks like versus don't take it from us. You now felt it in your wallet, in your family's security, and in global security. So I think we get 8 years, maybe even 12, because people are voting now on what worked for them across all demographics. And that's why I think we're going to win November 5th. It was better for their wallet, better for their security, better for their family. I can tell you in Florida, universal school choice, each student costs X amount. You now get a voucher, and parents take your kids where they're getting the best results, bypassing the teachers union and bypassing the broken, in often cases, broken public school system. And so I just think we keep putting results on the table. President Trump is going to clean house. I hope to help him with that however I can. And yeah, it's a lot in 4 years. But look at what he got done. Generational tax reform, a new NAFTA deal nobody said could get done with USMCA, justice reform, the Veterans Mission Act that veterans have been asking for years that gives them choice to go to their local doctor rather than the VA hospital, the Abraham Accords we already talked about, the pivot on China. Hell, I talk about in my book, everybody laughed at him with the Space Force.
Yep.
He kept saying we can't be number one on Earth if we're number two in space. His Air Force secretary was kind of dragging her feet because she was listening to the generals rather than the president that put her there. He fired her by tweet. I mean, literally, kind of an asshole move. But you know what? Disruptors aren't nice guys. And the generals were in my office literally the next day saying, okay, how do we create this new branch of the of the military? You need that disruptor. And what the primary tested, the people that were running against him is, you don't get the America First kind of policies that everybody says they love without the personality, without the leader. You don't get SpaceX without Elon. Mm-hmm. You don't get, Apple without Steve Jobs. I don't think you get that disruption that the swamp needs without Donald Trump.
Yeah, and speaking of Space Force, I remember they made a TV show about it. It was a big joke and everything else. And then, what was it, 3 days ago, we saw Elon re-land that rocket, launch it, and re-land it inside of a basketball hoop, it seemed like. And you're like, oh, is that where we're headed with all of this? Man, maybe that was a good idea. That was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen as far as engineering goes in the history of our country. But because Elon's, on the right and wants Trump to win, he's not getting the credit he deserves for that. But SpaceX is doing amazing things up there. Your own state, Florida, Jesus, man. You guys really turned it around over the years. I've said this numerous times on this show. Dan and I have had to go there for work, 50 times in the last 3 or 4 years, I feel like, because of the Seltzer and Miami Marlins and Tampa Bay Rays deal and all that other stuff. It is completely different than it used to be 15 years ago. It's amazing what great leadership, good congressmen, and a great governor can really do to the states. It is possible. So, like, abandoning your city of a San Francisco or like they're doing in California and locking down the Rite Aids and shutting everything down, if you just change the policies and you voted the right people in, you can turn your state around. How is DeSantis in real life?
Well, look, he's all business. I mean, he's not. You guys are the Drinkin bros. He's not going to sit around and have a beer with you guys all night. He is policy, putting points on the board, and work. He had my congressional district. I ran for his congressional district when he ran for governor. We touched the Space Coast, Cape Canaveral. So I can nerd out with you guys on commercial space, NASA, all of that all day long. One of the stories I talk about in my book was getting President Trump down to the SpaceX launch. And I never forget, I called him to try to convince him to come. And I said, look, when Obama canceled the space shuttle and canceled the follow-on program, we had to start Mother May-ing the Russians to get our astronauts in space. And shouldn't surprise anybody, they started out at $9 million a launch. Once they knew they had us by the balls, it ballooned up to $90 million a launch. And thank God, because Trump said, open the door to SpaceX and all of commercial space, let the private sector take this on, and they did. We had a private-built rocket launched from U.S. soil with 2 colonels on top of it for the first time, and President Trump got down there, and I'll never forget watching that launch. I remember the Challenger and what happened to Challenger, what happened to Endeavour. I mean, Elon was about white as a ghost, and when that rocket went up, he started doing his happy dance that you guys just saw the other day at the rally. But it is incredible. It's just phenomenal what we're doing up there, and it is the new economy. It's also the new battleground. The Russians and Chinese have a deal to put a manned station on the moon by the end of this decade, and they're on track. And everything they do has a military application to it.
Of course, because you can obviously have satellites over everything that we do. You get all the information. You get all that stuff. So, it feels like we are in another space race, and we've got to get in this. And luckily, Trump had the foresight, at least, to create the Space Force and get ahead of it. Now he'll be able to continue this as this goes, it appears right now. Obviously, I said the same thing in 2020, and I was wrong on that. But or was I? Who knows? I'm not going to ask you that question. I'll save you on that one today.
But I already did CNN today. We had to go round and round.
Oh, okay. Did they ask you about whether the election was real in 2020?
They went down this stupid path of Trump playing a bunch of music at his rally. And because somebody was sick in the audience, he said, well, hey, turn on the music so it's not really awkward while the paramedics come in. And I said, really, guys? We've got the Iranians openly talking about and plotting to kill a leading political candidate and foreign president. Biden and Kamala are basically shoulder shrugging it, and you want to talk about the music at his rallies? But yeah, that's all right.
I can speak on that real quick. A listener was there, so I apologize, Dan. A listener of ours was there and said that there was a medical emergency in the audience, and then they played a playlist while they helped the person that was.
Yeah, it's whatever the music that plays after he leaves the stage. Basically, as people are exiting, they just played it earlier. CBS for for what it's worth, actually called CNN out on this and said, no, that wasn't awkward or weird. They were just, it seemed like he was kind of being a nice guy, actually.
Yeah, it was a medical emergency. Right? What I loved is on his playlist, song 9 was November Rain. And that's also still on my playlist. And I love that.
The first one was YMCA by the Village People.
It's always been YMCA.
Yeah.
I don't really know why.
Likes that song. Maybe he's a big Fireman fan. But he loves first responders. So.
Sure does. But I was shocked by November Rain. Yeah. I mean, that's an old school.
Loves Pavarotti. Loves Phantom of the Opera. He's got. I had my first look at actually DJ Trump, where he pulls out his iPad. Was actually with the Abbey Gate Gold Star families. The 13 that were killed in the Afghanistan debacle. Biden wouldn't give them a meeting. Mm-hmm. Literally wouldn't take a meeting, wouldn't take their calls. They still have all kinds of questions of what happened to their Marines. I called up President Trump and said, would you meet with him? He said, absolutely. Get him up here to Bedminster. We did. The scheduler is like, look, we can give him an hour. 30 minutes in, he says, clear my calendar. He met with each one individually. He met with them as a group. He promised them transparency, saying you can have all the emails, all the drone footage, anything that you want. We'll lock the generals in a room until you run out of questions. But then, so much for the hour. He invites them up to the restaurant, closes down the restaurant, spent the night with them, pulls out his iPad, and starts playing his music. Look, guys, I just can't describe it well enough. These moms that were so devastated. They were laughing. They were crying. He even got one of the couples up to start dancing. Said, you guys get up and dance, get up and dance. They were really having a hard time. And they got back together that evening. And two of the moms came up to me and said, this is the best thing that happened to me since I lost my son. That's the person I've come to know. He cares deeply about him. One of them said, will you sign a picture of my son? He said, absolutely. And then she pulls out a backpack of hats and everything else. And he spent the entire night with him. He cares deeply. But I saw DJ Trump in full action.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good, that whole scene, not just the empathetic part, but the whole scene is a good examination of the differences between Trump and Harris, right?
He wasn't checking his watch.
Yeah, well, that too.
That way. And that's the side the media never wants you to see, but sure. That's the man I see.
Yeah, they try to hide that a lot. And the other part is that Harris just doesn't command any respect. So she put out her policy for black dudes this morning for some reason. I don't know why the fuck you would have a separate policy for 6% of the country.
Yeah, I read that.
That's odd.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But let's just say it is on the level. One of them was to make weed legal, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. No problem with that. You're the vice president now. You're telling me with an incompetent president, one that doesn't have the ability to speak English anymore, you can't walk down to the DOJ and use your command presence to be like, hey, reduce it to Schedule 4 right now. Just do it. Talk to Merrick Garland. Hey, Merrick Garland, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to keep you on as AG after this. Go ahead and reduce marijuana down to Schedule 4. Now it's a fucking citation and not even a misdemeanor. Congratulations, you've done it. But the problem is that solved problems don't get out the vote. She's trying to leverage these people. And I think they see through it now. Now, conversely, Trump met with Zelensky and Netanyahu at their request. And he's not even the fucking president right now. They sought him out like, hey, can I talk to somebody that actually knows what the fuck's going on? Because Biden and Harris weren't in the city at the time. Mm-hmm. He was at the beach in Delaware and she was out somewhere else.
California. Yep.
It's like...
You know, they can just wipe away $150 billion of debt. They're not wiping it away. They're just making you all pay for it, right? They can completely undo the border, all by executive order, all by the stroke of a pen. They can cancel a pipeline that cost $16 billion and 11,000 jobs, all with a stroke of a pen. You're spot on. She could do it if she wanted to. And I think that's the message that keeps resonating. You heard J.D. Vance hammer that home, in addition to the president, that all of this stuff that you say would help, you could do right now if you wanted to. But she is kind of running away from Biden, but running towards them. But what is she running towards? Nobody knows. And it's completely ill-defined. It's total bullshit. People see right through it. And to your point on, agenda for black men, President Trump put in place opportunity zones that actually attracted investment into minority neighborhoods to help businesses. Was the first president to put permanent money towards historically black colleges and universities. And the biggest thing actually Democrats have been asking for was justice reform. That was in response to Biden's crime bill. Remember, we held up the little vial in the 90s of the crack cocaine, 3 strikes, you're out. Mm-hmm. So he's got substance to talk about, and she's got promises she maybe could get done if she really wanted to.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It seems like her whole campaign right now is like, hey, don't worry, we're going to fix all the shit we fucked up, which is not a very strong position to be debating from, to be honest, right?
No. Better said.
Well, yeah. I can get away with it.
Yeah, we can always get away with it. But I think, Mike, the strategy really was what Biden did in 2020. When you don't have somebody who's good in front of the camera, you don't have any policy, and you're not good at it, it was going to be to hide her. Now,
well, I'm sure you've heard the latest that she's talking about going on Rogan.
Today? I was
that would be the biggest mistake that any political candidate has ever made since John McCain chose Sarah Palin for his VP.
Because then she's got to go 3.5 hours. Rogan's not going to edit it.
There's no way. Well, he will. He's not going to edit shit out.
No.
But they do take breaks and stuff.
But not give her the 60 minutes edits. You know what I'm saying? Not the fun ones.
Right.
No.
And I think what happened is, with that strategy, it was working, and the media kept pumping out the lies that she was up in the polls by 8, 10 points over and over and over again. Something happened with some internal poll that we don't fucking know about, because we're not as smart as you, Mike, and we're not on the inside. But in the last week, it has been this media blitz of whoever will take me, I will go and talk because I need votes for some reason. And going on Howard Stern, Call Her Daddy, reaching out to Rogan, all of these
Don't forget The View.
The View. What would you change? What would you change about the last 4 years that Biden did? Nothing comes to mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not only nothing comes to mind, but I was in the room for all the big important decisions.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I don't know. Certainly she's got a team that
That's the ad right there. That's the ad. The Trump campaign immediately cut it.
Yeah.
Just ran that.
It's so crazy.
It's like over and over again.
Certainly,
the problem with all of the hide in the basement strategy was and let the media cover for was every day people are going to the grocery store. They still can't buy a house. They still can't buy a car. Their credit cards are maxed out. They're going to the gas station. And every time they turn on the news, you see missiles flying somewhere. So it's that sense of insecurity, that sense of weakness. And when she can't define what vibes don't pay the bills, vibes don't keep your family safe from crime, and vibes don't deter enemies like the Ayatollahs.
No, and there's no joy at the grocery store anymore for her and her campaign. Now, if she read your book, Hard Truths, Think and Lead Like a Green Beret, maybe she would think and learn like a Green Beret and turn her shit around, but she hasn't read the book, Mike, and that's on her. Give her an advanced copy, and maybe it'll help out the last couple weeks.
Hey, I'll send her the audio book. Maybe she'll listen. I don't know.
Well, that is the thing these days. Audiobook is what? I think 75% of the sales now. Did you do your own audiobook for this?
I did. I read the whole thing over about 4 days. Man, I hate hearing my own voice. But I talked to folks like, Brian Kilmeade and Bear and others. It just in terms of, do you have somebody do it or you do it yourself? And they said it's authenticity factor. You got to suck it up and do it.
You got to.
I did it myself.
Yeah, you have to. It's just very, very difficult. Yeah. It's just very, very difficult to do. And it's a strange thing to, one, hear your voice for the first time, but then also you're reading your own book about your entire life, and then you're reliving all these circumstances again that you went through over in the Middle East and Africa and all that other stuff. I mean, you talk about it in your book about the boy who was hanging from the tree, and I mean, you saw all of it over there. And
well, the first thing I have to keep clarifying is it's Waltz with a T, not Walls. So T for Trump. And I actually did retire as a colonel, not a general. I'm proud of my rank. I don't have to lie about it. And carried a bunch of weapons of war in actual wars. But my poor staff, ever since has gotten announced, having to answer the phones.
Oh, I bet.
It's gotten a little sporty and spicy.
Yeah.
Look, I get asked this question all the time. What's the difference? Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs. And after, of course, I talk about the better hair and smarter and better looking. But in all seriousness, look, you guys know what we did to Osama bin Laden, Dev Group, SEAL Team 6, the Rangers at a larger scale, putting 2 bullets on foreheads in the middle of the night, the other side of the world, in a heavily contested environment. They're the best in the world at getting in there and getting out. Green Berets, training's much longer, multiple languages, specializing in local culture, and take a couple of us, like my second tour, there were 3 of us embedded with a task force of 90 Arabs from Jordan and the UAE, partnered with 180 Afghans. And we were just out there as close as I'll get to Lawrence of Arabia. There's nothing like getting that call saying, hey, there's somebody on the inside that's talking to the Taliban about selling you guys out, and they just put a bounty on your head. And by the way, if I never eat goat again, I'm good. We were out there pretty alone, sometimes very afraid, and it takes a different mindset, takes a different mentality. And I talk about in each chapter kind of a lesson learned from some of these experiences in combat, and then how I'm applying it, now to DC. And I swear, guys, I think building a coalition with a bunch of tribes and warlords in Africa, some days I think was a little bit easier than dealing with the tribes in Washington, D.C. in the swamp. But a lot of that mindset absolutely applies.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing right now in a big way, over and over again, how poorly things can go, how wrong they can go when people who can't handle the stress or can't operate in the chaos are put in positions of command over that stuff. We're seeing it with federal response in North Carolina right now. Mm-hmm. It's fucked up like a football bat. And, look, the people that are on the ground are trying to do what they're trying to do. The individual FEMA employee, for example, isn't the issue here in any way. It is the fact that there's no command. There's no leadership from the White House at all, right? Roy Cooper should have, as I've been saying over and over again, immediately declared a state of emergency, handed over the ICS to the federal authorities, as is the fucking rule, right, in a disaster situation like this. But instead, there's a female colonel on his National Guard staff that's lying to people and telling them all kinds of fucked up, crazy bullshit about how Appalachian people are going to start attacking FEMA workers if they come up there. Okay, one dude said something. One guy, what's his name? I'll tell you his name. William Jacob Parsons. I don't know why they always have 3 names. He drove around in a truck that had a sign or something that said "fuck FEMA" or "we're going to get you" or whatever the fuck. And this woman and her team, and then somebody else is involved in this as well, lied and said that militia members were driving around in the back of trucks looking for FEMA people. That is a fucking lie. The sheriff looked into it. It was one guy, right? Mm-hmm. And what did FEMA do? They pulled all their people out because there's nobody with any fucking sense down there, right? Roy Cooper's an asshole. He needs to be ejected from politics forever.
He's gone.
No, he'll be in a fucking Democratic administration at some point. I promise you that. Or he may run for Senate or something like that in North Carolina. I think he might try to primary Tillis, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Not primary Tillis, but go against Tillis.
Yeah.
He is a total piece of shit, incompetent. We are seeing what happens when people who have no leadership skills, people who have no ability or no concept of how to operate when things are chaotic. You know what I mean? That's a skill. That's why I tell veterans getting out of the military all the time. You've got a talent or a skill or whatever it is that nobody else has. They have no ability through their normal life and through no fault of their own to have acquired this particular skill. That is a superpower you can use in any job, whether it's a fucking garbage man or whether you're a fucking leader in a corporate office somewhere. It doesn't matter where it is.
And I don't care who you are, you always feel more secure with more veterans around, and you know shit is going to get done, and it's going to get done on time. In your book, talking about it, and this is something that Dan always brings up a lot on this show, is for people in politics to make these flippant decisions regarding sending American troops to wars and all that other shit, you should have to have served at some point and been over there to understand the consequences when you make a decision that big and who it's going to affect. Because if not, you shouldn't be making that decision.
And constantly be asking, what does success look like? What is victory in line with American interests? I'm worried about America, Americans, right, and American interests. So when we get the heck out. And that's what we lost sight of in Afghanistan. That's what we lost sight of in Bosnia and the Balkans, and how we end up just going on and on and on. I'm so glad you raised the point about Cooper, because he's the one that dropped the ball. He didn't request federal troops and activation until 5 days in. In Florida, you've already got all that stuff pre-baked. Mm-hmm. It's already ready to go. It's a paperwork drill, and if you don't need it, fine. Because we have great leadership between our governors and our state legislatures and our congressional district. You had the 82nd Airborne right down the road.
Who, by the way, the 82nd Airborne, which is where the 82nd where I was, I want to say this again. Everybody knows this is kicking doors down and gunfighting in the GWAT, fine, whatever. But the thing that we train on all the time is going into a non-permissive environment and basically setting up an entire city worth of assets. That's what we specialize in.
You've got the hospitals, you've got the water, you've got the cell towers, you've got the air traffic controllers, not to mention the helicopters, the road repair, the engineers, all of it. And if you can plop down to Haiti with 24 hours notice, you can go up the street into Appalachia. And so, but the state government and governor has to request it, and they were dragging ass and they dropped the ball, and people are suffering. And now you guys asked me to bring it around to the election. I'm worried about their ability to get all their ballots and get it in. Trump won that area by 200,000 votes in 2020. The good news is Laura Trump, chair of the RNC from North Carolina, Michael Whatley, also heading the RNC, also from North Carolina. They know the area very well, but people are drinking water out of a lake. They may not be, may not be as able to send in a ballot, but at the same time, they're really pissed off.
Yeah, Whatley's on it though. We've talked to his office. He's definitely making sure that everybody can vote up there. And then in addition,
but I don't think Cooper cares that much.
No, he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care if people live or die, obviously, through his actions. All he cares about are optics.
And he's out of there in 3 months anyways. So what the fuck does he like? He's got nothing to run for right now. So he doesn't care. And he's already checked out.
The situation on the ground is the outer mile people, I guess you could call them, people that are outside of the direct reach. You know what I mean? That live in the hinterland, even of Appalachia. Mm-hmm. They're going to be without power for 3 to 6 months, right? And it's going to get cold really soon. Unconfirmed right now, but I got a report yesterday that 3 people died overnight and 11 more got checked into a hospital for hypothermia because they're sleeping in tents outside or sleeping bags on the ground right now, right? So, our people, Save Our Allies, they're there working on stuff, trying to get some things done right now. But the next step is probably going to be to build fire, like literally go back to caveman style. We're going to build fire pits. We're going to get wood stoves and shit out there. And we're going to send some Joes up there to chop fucking firewood. Because, luckily there's a bunch of it lying around.
Yeah, and Mike, we were there. We lived there in North Carolina before we moved to Texas. So Roy Cooper, we knew what a piece of shit he already was 5 years ago, let alone now. So it's not a big shock. And I will say this about the resiliency of those people up there. If you're worried about them voting, I would not be.
All they need is a little bit of help.
That's it.
You give them
figure it out and walk.
Figure it out.
How far they need to walk to vote. Like those guys go out and vote on the day. That's not going to be a mail-in ballot situation for any of those guys. I can promise you that. And everything that just happened to that community and the devastation and seeing what a Democratic leadership is like in that state, they'll go out and vote even harder because of what just happened to them and what's going on up there right now. Luckily,
Good.
you guys don't have to deal with that in Florida. You had 2 hurricanes back to back, and we really haven't heard that much, to be honest with you. Tell us what happened with the most recent one, Milton, that came through the state.
Well, I mean, to your point, just Florida Power and Light working with our state government, 17,000 employees fully mobilized, staged at the World Equestrian Center in Ocala, staged dozens of trucks at the Daytona. I've got the Daytona 500, the Speedway in my district. That thing it had a battalion's worth of trucks lined up, 5,000 National Guard men and women, all the aviation ready to go. And again, if you don't need it, fine. But it was there that and ready to go. The hurricane exited over my district. It's a 1-2 punch. You get the flooding as it heads from the west, and then as it heads off into the Atlantic, the wind whips around like a right hook and hits you again. I'm worried about our farmers right now. They can't. Their fields are flooded. Their crops are destroyed, and they can't get to their livestock. And Trump pushed all the money out of the Department of Agriculture down to the state and locals. The Biden-Harris agriculture secretary is holding on to it in Washington, D.C. So we're in that fight right now, but we'll shake it loose and get it out and help them. 30% of the nation's food supply comes through Florida. People think of tourism, but it's actually a huge ag state, and with our ports from South Central America too. So we'll recover. We're well led, and we'll get her done. Yeah, we'll move forward.
Yeah.
You know, and Trump had 275 linemen staying at one of his hotels down there for free, obviously.
That's right.
The day before the storm hit, just to be ready. I mean, within, a couple of hours of the storm, about 1 million people had lost power, and I think you guys are almost back up to 100% already.
That's right.
And that's just be ready.
It's just decent leadership. That's
man.
all it is. It's just decent leadership.
This isn't rocket surgery, and he lives
I talk about in the book pace planning, right?
Yeah.
Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. You got 3 backups, whether it's your weapon system or whether it's your power grid. I mean, it's just prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
And you don't have to be a Green Beret or even a veteran
to
to know this stuff. This is just basic common sense, right?
I wanted to talk about, but you were talking about having veterans in. Look, when I ran, that's one of the things that convinced me to do this insanity. My wife is like, okay, you got shot at for 27 years all over the world. And then I had a business that was growing and successful. I did the stupidest thing financially that I've ever done was walk away from it after we had taken a private equity buy-in to do this. But it's because, in the 70s, 75% of the Congress, 3/4 were vets. By the time I ran, it was down to 15%, record low in our nation's history. I think doesn't explain everything, but it's a lot of the record amount of dysfunction because, if we were willing to die together on a tank plane ship, we can roll up our sleeves, have a mission focus, and get stuff done. But I also talk about getting us back to national service, and not just veterans in our politics. It's getting everybody serving, and I'm not talking about a draft or mandatory military service. You can do inner city tutoring, you can do elderly care, you can do national parks, FEMA volunteer corps. But how do we get young people back to a mindset, kind of off the couch, off the phone, of discipline, leadership, followership, teamwork, doing it with other Americans who don't look like you. I talk about a Korean War veteran who came up to me after an event and said he grew up in the segregated South, never had a relationship with anybody of color, gets on his first ship in the Navy, and he's literally sleeping on top of a black man as they're swapping bunks, his bunkmate, and they became lifelong friends. They had that forcing function to understand each other. Bernie Sanders is talking about just giving everybody everything for free. I think the taxpayer deserves some kind of service, an educational benefit after you volunteered and serve. And if we get back to that mindset, I think we'll be a far better country for it. And the more veterans in politics, the better. We've increased the percentage now back to about 25%. First increase in about 40 to 50 years that we've done that. And so it's that, let's make serving each other great again. And it's at the community level, churches, neighbors. Government can't solve all your problems, nor should it, because they'll probably screw it up.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll tell you how I would do it. I've talked about this many, many times. I'd move foreign language requirements for graduation to primary school where they belong, because nobody's learning a foreign language at 14 and 15 in 4 semesters. It's fucking pointless. And then I would replace those 4 semesters with community service. You have to do 4 semesters of community service to graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
And you could easily enforce this. All you do is make that. Look, I think we should get rid of the Department of Education entirely. But you make that any kind of university that receives federal funds, you make that one of the requirements for admission. The end. That's it. And it's done.
How about civics? Since 60% of 18 to 25-year-olds can't name the 3 branches of government, but consider themselves an activist. And one big step we just got done that I sponsored the last defense bill was 30% expansion of junior ROTC in high schools. Not everybody joins, but you know what? They learn those kind of life skills: right place, right time, right uniform. And in a lot of the minority single parent high schools, you get a positive mentor, a man or a woman that are leading those junior ROTC units in the high schools as well. And civics is mandatory as part of that.
Yeah.
And Mike, one thing I'd like to see, since you brought it up about forcing people together, Dan and I have both been to the White House on separate occasions, sat with Congress and Senate and all that stuff. What shocked me, and I've said this on the show a few times, was you guys don't even eat together. I went to both of the dining halls. I went to the Republican day one, and then second day I went to the Democratic one, and I was like, okay, so you guys are never in the same room. You even have separate places that you eat. How are you supposed to come together and solve issues if you don't even know one another and it's all clicked like high school, where essentially you have 2 separate lunch tables, but neither of you guys talk to each other?
Even during the orientation, they all put us on separate buses, right? The Republican bus and the Democrat bus, as we were kind of going around Washington, D.C. Look, I've co-founded a caucus. It's called For Country. So that's what we should be here for. And it's vets, mostly post 9/11, but we've still got a couple of Vietnam on both sides of the aisle that we come together on all kinds of issues. It's not that we agree on everything just because you're a veteran. We disagree on all kinds of things, but it's that, like I said, it's that ethos of service. When we were on the black helicopter going after Al Qaeda, nobody was counting how many Hispanics. Nobody gave a shit about how many Republicans or Democrats. We were just Americans. And that's my problem with the military now. If you set that aside, damn, I just had a knockdown throwdown with the superintendent, 3-star general of the Air Force Academy, because they were doing pronoun training in the cadet orientation. They were saying colorblind is offensive and teach it, indoctrinating them with this nonsense. 18-year-old cadet, future Air Force officers. I said to this general, I've called in every aircraft in the inventory except the B-2 stealth bomber for close air support. Never once did my Green Berets ask, well, what skin color is the pilot? What religion's the pilot? What sexual orientation? Nobody cares. They just want bombs on foreheads accurately. And I'll tell you what, our enemy's bullets don't give a damn. They just care you're American or not. We've got to get back to that mentality. And I don't know if you remember Milley and his big speech, well, I want to understand my white rage and I want to understand critical race theory. That was actually in response to my questions in hearing. I write about the backstory of it in the book, where I held up a deck of slides that I'd gotten from a family whose cadet was going to West Point. The title of the slides were Understanding Your Whiteness and White Rage. This was a lecture being taught at West Point. So we have got to carve that crap out. But we're going to have a new commander-in-chief that tells the generals, do it or you're fired. And by the way, let's fire some generals while we're at it. While we've got a recruiting crisis, a readiness crisis, 40% of our submarines can't get out of the repair yards, and only 29% of the Joint Strike Fighter, our most expensive weapon system ever, is full mission capable, where all the bells and whistles actually work. But you never see, whether it's the Afghanistan withdrawal or those statistics, no one ever gets fired. There's zero accountability. And we've got to get back to the meritocracy where you have actual accountability. And you guys know in special operations, you screw up, you have a bad shot, you have a zinger in the house or an accidental discharge, you're gone. You're out. You're off the teams. But that's not the case in the E-ring and the Pentagon.
No, and you did say Green Beret. You're going to lose that if Kamala gets in because that could be offensive to aliens that could potentially land here. We're going to have to change that color, my man. We're going to have to switch it up. But I think that was one of Trump's biggest frustrations when he was in there was that he couldn't run it like a board meeting. You couldn't just get everybody together and say, all right, great, let's try to figure this out, who did what wrong and everything else. And that's something I still think in D.C. that you guys need to correct. You shouldn't be separated at all, first of all. And I think you get a lot more done. You'd also get to know each other. Same with the military, where you learn about each other's lives. The more and more you're forced to spend time together, the more and more you realize the issues probably aren't that far apart. And then hopefully you're not jamming shit inside of a bill and then calling it the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really just the Green New Deal. Like, that's what we need to get together on and kind of figure out. I just don't know if that's possible anymore. Do you think that eventually Senate and Congress will be in one space and you'll be able to chat about things? Or is this division just going to go on forever?
Well, I mean, there'll always be an element of it, right? I mean, they're shirts and skins. But to your point, there are a number of factors that have driven the polarization. The crazier things and more inflammatory things you say, the more clicks you get. I put a lot of it on the media. I don't know if you remember a few months ago where we had a hearing where literally people were throwing down about eyelashes and, Marjorie, who I think is fantastic, she was going down with the other side. The media covered that nonstop for a week. What they didn't cover was all the bipartisan stuff we just got done, one of the largest pay raises ever for our troops in the defense bill in the same week. But that's what the media incentivizes. They love train wrecks. That's why people slow down when they see a car wreck, and that's what gets them the clicks. So I put a lot of the sensationalism that's driving a lot of the bad behavior at the media's feet. And it's not just what they cover; it's what they don't cover.
Yeah, we had Marjorie on the show right before Christmas. I was surprised at how not crazy she seemed.
I agree.
You can clip up anybody and make anybody insane
Well, no, she says some pretty fucked up shit, to be honest.
Totally.
Like, I don't think she's a lunatic or anything. She just says some crazy shit.
And that's on both sides, by the way. I don't think AOC is as crazy as she probably is as well. Who is somebody in Congress that you've had a conversation with on the left that you were shocked by, that you were like, okay, I would be friends with this person in real life, and we're not that far apart? Is there a group of people that you work with personally?
Well, that what we call a caucus, which is basically a group of veterans I work with all the time, called For Country.
Is Tammy Duckworth in there?
She's over on the Senate.
Okay.
I'm over in the House. But, like, for example, a guy by the name of Jason Crow. He's a former Ranger. He's a Democrat. I don't know why I keep telling him to switch, but he is out of Colorado. We went over to Normandy together for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and we jumped out of the original World War II plane that led the invasion fleet called That's All Brother, 81-year-old C-47. We wore original World War II gear. By the way, we jumped with a 97-year-old paratrooper who had not jumped since 1944. He was tandem to a buddy of mine. When we hit the ground, I walked up to him. His name was Jimmy. I was like, "How was that, man? You okay?" And he said, "A hell of a lot better than last time. None of the Germans were shooting at me. This was a lot more fun." But, CNN covered that, Fox covered that. Americans need to see that, see us honoring our forefathers, and he and I will be friends after all of this is done. Same thing in the middle of the Mueller investigation, impeachment left and right. Everybody's calling each other a racist. I sent a note out to all of the veterans in the House and said, meet me at 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning with the National Park Service at the Vietnam Memorial Wall. 42 members of Congress cleared their schedules and did at sunrise, and we watched the Vietnam Memorial Wall together. And again, we had both Fox and CNN camera crews out there for America to see that. That we can sit all the bullshit aside and focus on what's important and honor those who don't have I mean, we all wear these bracelets for men and women that we didn't bring back. And I tell my colleagues, I tell myself all the time, be worthy, be worthy of that sacrifice. Would they be proud of how we're comporting ourselves today?
Dan has said on this show that he thinks that the Republicans will win Congress, Senate, and the White House. Do you believe the same?
I think we wake up and we have the Senate. We either have the Senate or we have all three. Because I think the House will move with the White House. Either Trump will drive turnout and drive enthusiasm, kind of rising tide lifts all boats, and pull the House with it, or won't. But either way, I mean, we already got 50 in the Senate with Manchin's seat in West Virginia. And between Tim Sheehy, former SEAL, in Montana, who's ahead of Tester, Ohio with Bernie Moreno, another veteran, Sam Brown, who was blown up in an IED in Nevada, Arizona. Between one of those 4 or 5, we're going to get another seat. And you could have Larry Hogan sneak up in Maryland. We've got a couple of sleepers out there, so I'm very confident in the Senate. And feeling good about the White House. And the White House, President Trump will pull the House with us, and we'll either have all three or just the Senate.
And then, do you actually enjoy the job? Do you enjoy being a congressman? Because I've thought about it. We've all thought about it. They've asked Dan a ton of times, our listeners over the years. We've all thought about a run. Dan. How is it? But what's it really like on a day-to-day basis?
Look, there's the big legislation like, healthcare reform, veterans reform. That is frustrating as hell. It's hurting cats, getting everybody on board. I enjoy the committee work that I'm on. We pass a defense bill every single year for the last 62 years. And I think the number one job of the federal government is to secure our borders and keep us safe from our enemies abroad. Almost everything else I want to push down to state and local, and keep Washington and the agencies out of it as much as I can. I enjoy the committee work on the Intel Committee, on the Armed Services Committee, things like what the hell happened with these assassination attempts. I'm on that task force. But really the part that gets overlooked are kind of the base hits back in your district. When I've got, literally, I just had a widow that was owed over $90,000 by the VA, and she was at her wit's end with call centers and getting the runaround. I put a finger in a bureaucrat's chest and got that done. And she walked up to one of my local staff in tears just the last week and gave them a huge hug. We changed her life. We got her money back that she had and her husband had earned through their service. So those kind of, like I was saying about the media, that doesn't get covered, but you're putting points on the board for your fellow Americans. That gets me up in the morning to keep going. And then I'm focused on the national security stuff, guys. And between terrorism coming roaring back in Afghanistan, with what China is doing, with the mess that this administration has made, we have a sacred duty to have good policies that keep our soldiers and sailors and airmen out of wars, but having them prepared, and so that we don't have. I like unfair firefights if we have to get into one. That keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I know you're a busy guy, and obviously you're doing interviews across the board for your book, Hard Truths. Think and Lead Like a Green Beret, which is available for pre-order right now. Comes out next Tuesday on Amazon. All these pre-orders count for the opening of the New York Times bestseller list. We know a thing or two about that on this show.
Well, by the way, none of the royalties are coming to me. I'm donating them all to the Matt Pacino Foundation, Green Beret Foundation, and other charities. I know we debate a lot. We give the SEALs a lot of crap about all the movies and the books. Rightly, they deserve it. I think, creative writing's part of BUDS now. But I actually, with less than 1% serving, 99% of America not serving, I actually think veterans should get their stories out there. But I'm proudly going to donate it to charities to help those that didn't make it back.
That's awesome. Well, now's the point in our show we get to this thing called the Drinkin' Bro of the Week, which is someone who has inspired you or helped you become the person you are today. Who would you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the Week to?
This is going to probably sound pretty cheesy, but I got to give it to my mom. This woman is a rock. She's a badass. Actually, I have to get it my mom and my wife. My wife was also a veteran. She was Trump's hostage negotiator for the State Department and his Homeland Security advisor. I'm just surrounded by great, strong women. I know that's not a drinking bro thing, but man,
it's a broette. It's a broette.
When you got that kind of support to do what I'm doing and face the fights that we're fighting, then I'll give it to those two. And my mom, by the way, is 75 years old. She's still getting up at 4:30 a.m. to go rowing, like crew, on the St. Johns River. She's running circles around all of us. That's intense. And your wife's got to go all these functions with you all over the place. That's not an easy schedule either. So nothing like marrying a veteran. She's got more combat tours than I do, both Iraq and Afghanistan. And then she's a hostage negotiator. So like, you never win an argument as a husband. I like truly never win one, ever. Not even close. Well, look, we appreciate what you're doing in Florida. If Trump gets in, you might have a higher position up there. Who knows? We'll see. In the meantime, please go out and buy his book, Hard Truths, Think and Lead Like a Green Beret. It is available for pre-order right now and out next Tuesday. Thank you for your time, Congressman. Hey, thanks, guys. Absolutely. Go to iTunes, rate the show a 5-star, and leave a quick review. Also, head on over to Spotify. It's just a 5-star, and you can walk away. For D'Anthony Holloway, I'm Ross Patterson. This is the Drinkin' Bros Podcast. Good night, everyone.